Chain of Good. Cecilia was a young 27-year-old woman known for her kindness and dedication to others. She worked as a nurse at the Central Hospital of Florianopolis, Santa Catarina, Brazil, where she was admired by colleagues and patients. His life, despite being intense, was peaceful, dedicated to work and his small family. She lived with her mother, Dona Carmem, a 65-year-old woman, and her daughter Swellum, 7 years old. But life, sometimes, wants to test us, and, in Cecilia's case, it was a great test. Little did we know that she would face a challenge that would shake her deeply. After a series of routine tests, he was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor, and as if it couldn't get any worse, it was inoperable. The news was devastating. Cecilia, who had always been the strength and comfort to her family and patients, now found herself in a vulnerable position, uncertain about her future. The doctors were clear. The tumor was aggressive and treatment options were limited. Chemotherapy could prolong his life, but the side effects would be severe, compromising his days. Faced with this reality, Cecilia decided that she wanted to live her last remaining days with dignity, alongside her family. But this decision only came after a lot of emotional and psychological suffering, right after the non-acceptance phase. Dona Carmem and her granddaughter were devastated by the news. Carmem, a woman of unshakable faith, began attending church daily, praying fervently for a miracle. Swellum, still so little, did not fully understand the gravity of the situation, but she felt the sadness at home and the absence of smiles that were so common before. Cecilia tried to maintain normality, despite the weight in her heart. She continued to work, even despite medical disapproval and advice. She also spent as much time as possible with her daughter. Every moment became precious. In the midst of this storm, an unexpected event brought a ray of hope. At the hospital, Cecilia met a new patient, an elderly man named João, who had been admitted after a car accident. João was a mysterious man, with an air of wisdom and tranquility that contrasted with the hustle and bustle of the hospital. During the days of hospitalization, João and Cecilia developed an unusual friendship. He always had words of encouragement and fascinating stories about his life. João was a man of faith, and his presence began to have a calming effect on Cecilia. He talked about miracles in a way that didn't seem forced or exaggerated, but as something natural, something that was part of life. One day, while she was in João's room to check her vital signs, he held her hand and said, "Cecilia, you have a strong spirit and a pure soul. Never lose hope. Miracles happen when we least expect it. Faith is a powerful force." These words resonated deeply with Cecilia. Although she was skeptical about miracles, something in John's voice touched her. From that day on, she began to allow a thread of hope to enter her heart. She continued to accompany João during his recovery, and he became a pillar of strength for her. Shortly before being released from the hospital, João gave Cecilia a small amulet, a wooden cross that he had carved many years ago, and then said to her, "Keep this with you, Cecilia. It is a symbol of faith and hope. And remember, in time, you will know what to do with it." With tears in her eyes, Cecilia thanked João and promised to take good care of the amulet. After João left, Cecilia faced her reality again. The days passed, and her health began to decline more quickly than she had expected. Dona Carmem, realizing her daughter's growing fragility, intensified her prayers. After all, she had no other choice but to resort to what she believed. One night, while Cecilia was lying in bed, weak and exhausted, she remembered the gift she received from João. So, with difficulty, she got up from the bed, went to a box where she had kept the object, picked it up, and went back to where she was. He was there, with that small sculpture in her hands. Cecilia just says, "My friend said to have faith, and that I should trust this cross and what it represents, so here I am. If there is someone up there who can do something for me, I accept it," I just want to see my daughter grow up." That same night, Cecilia had a vivid dream. She saw her own body lying down, and that a sphere of light descended from the ceiling and began to hover over her head. She observed everything and felt nothing, not even astonishment. She just admired. Then, Cecilia wakes up scared and sits up in bed. For her, it was something so real that she was unsure if it really was a dream. The next morning, when Cecilia woke up, she felt a strange sensation of serenity. She didn't get that image out of her head, and strangely, she knew that deep down something had changed, although she couldn't explain what. In the days that followed, she began to notice improvements in her health. The constant headache that plagued her began to subside, and her energy gradually returned. Doctors were perplexed by Cecilia's inexplicable recovery. The new exams revealed something surprising. Whenever the results arrived, the team of doctors were confused. The tumor began to reduce in size at an astonishing speed. There was no medical explanation for what they were seeing, but the results were undeniable. Cecilia, deep down she knew that all that surprising change had to do with that strange dream of hers. Donna Karamam and her granddaughter only knew how to celebrate and put aside the near depression they were experiencing. Cecilia, in turn, felt confused but clearly grateful, and this revived her faith. She continued with her treatment, but now everything was different. His miraculous recovery began to spread throughout the hospital, and people who had their relatives hospitalized there had their hopes renewed. Cecilia never forgot Joao's words and the small wooden cross he gave her. He always kept it with him as a symbol of faith and hope. And suddenly, in the blink of an eye, Cecilia was completely cured. Her life returned to normal, and she was able to continue to see her daughter grow up and have her own dreams as she wished. Years later, while walking through the same hospital where it all began, Cecilia came across a young nurse who seemed to be going through a difficult time. She didn't think twice. She remembered when she herself walked through those corridors without knowing what to do in the worst phase of her life. So she approached the young nurse and, with a gentle smile, handed her the small cross, wood, and said, "Keep this with you. It is a symbol of faith and hope. One day you will know what to do with it." The young nurse, with tears in her eyes, thanked Cecilia, seeming to need to hear words of comfort. Cecilia lived many years beyond the doctor's initial expectations. She watched her daughter graduate from college and helped her move into her new home. Donna Karamam lived to see her daughter's recovery and her granddaughter's happiness. She passed away peacefully at the age of 84, knowing that her prayers had been answered and that Cecilia was safe. The small wooden cross passed from hand to hand, like a chain of good, always carrying the message of faith and hope. At least that was the story everyone told. Cecilia is now retired, dedicating herself even more to caring for people even outside the hospital environment. His story became a beacon of hope for many who were facing hardship. She always said, "Believe in the impossible." I'm proof of that. Cecilia, the woman who tried hard to believe in miracles, was granted one, and all for a simple act of believing. When Cecilia passed away, surrounded by her family, she left a legacy of love, faith, and hope that continued to inspire generations. His story was remembered, not just as a tale or a miracle, but as an example of the power of the human spirit to believe. His faith not only saved his life, but also brought light and inspiration to everyone around him. It is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, we should never lose hope, as miracles can happen when we least expect it. Cecilia, in her time, was so respected for her dedication and, later, for the miracle she experienced, that a public square in front of the hospital was named after her. True prayer does not depend on rites and protocols, but from the simplest attitude of believing